welcome to Season 4 of the Soccer Coaching Podcast, brought to you in association with our friends at Spond. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. Tom, welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast. How are you doing?
Good, Scott. Great to be here from my home in Tokyo, Japan.
Yep, you're probably our furthest guest, our virtual guest, so thank you so much. We've negotiated the time difference. I think it's getting to early evening for you over there now.
That's right. It's right before dinner time here in Tokyo. And I guess it's the morning time for you.
It is.
We're flip-flopped. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much. Again, I'm always delighted with guests that, we reach out and we ask kindly, and, most, including yourself, straight away comes back and say, yeah, no problem at all. I'll make myself available to you. So honestly, I'm really grateful for that. I know you're a very busy person with lots going on. So on behalf of myself and the listeners, thank you so much for agreeing to spend the next half an hour or so with us chatting about a key topic, really. So we've not really covered kind of entry level around football. But before we get on to that, for those that maybe haven't come across you, and I'm sure there's not many, but if for those that haven't, a little about who you are, your background, and what it is you currently do.
Sure. I mean, I'm originally from the United States, born in New York City in the Bronx, lived upstate New York. And giving you the short version here, I wound up in Japan in the mid-1980s. I played in the States. I grew up during the old North American Soccer League era with Pelé, Johan Cruyff, George Best. Just the who's who of that generation who came over to play. So that was a lot of the thrust or inspiration behind me wanting to be a soccer or football player. But it was not a good time to grow up and aspire to be a professional player as an American, because the league was just in kind of shambles. There were more foreigners playing than Americans on the teams. Quotas, this, that, and the other thing. And then the whole league started and folded and dissolved. So I wound up in Japan in the 1980s and played for a team here called Hitachi, which is now in the J League. The J League was born in 1993. And after I got out of my playing days, I didn't play in the J League. I played pre-J League. But after I got out of the playing, I fell in love with Japan and decided to stay here, and got kind of, right into football and football development, particularly. And kind of the rest is pretty much history.
But that's probably quite a cultural shift from New York in the Bronx to Japan. I mean, how did you adjust? Did it just feel right, or did it take some adjustment?
Well, I came back in the 80s, which is considered in Japan what we call the bubble, where the exchange rates in Japan was just flying. I mean, they were buying up, Rockefeller Center. They were buying up like just everything in the United States. I came here. I mean, it's a very, very friendly place for Americans, of course, living under the military umbrella, so to speak, of the United States post-war. So it was very welcoming. Of course, major challenges in culture, speaking, mannerisms. I mean, just food, everything. But I learned to adapt, and it wasn't until I got out of playing and hung up the boots that I had to take it a little bit more serious, as in learning the language, learning the culture, started a business, surrounded myself with people who could do things that I couldn't do. I learned a lot. And really worked my way up the pecking order, so to speak, here in Japanese football. Which is not easy to be accepted into this kind of society of sports. But I came here before the boom started, the J League, which was started in 1993. And then it kind of became the perfect storm because the professional league was born. The JFA, Japan Football Association, put their hat in the ring to become the 2002 World Cup hosts. They had never qualified for a World Cup tournament until 98. So I kind of credit my grassroots background and all the work that I did that got me accepted into this kind of club or fraternity. I mean, as of today, fast forward, I've been here over 35, 36 years. So everybody that's my age is basically in a position of strong influence. My friend's the chairman and president of the JFA. Many of the coaches and many of the people running the J League clubs are friends of mine, guys I played with, guys that I hung out with and, socialized with. So it's, and in Japan, it's a culture that values equity, so to speak. The amount of time that I've put into Japan speaks volumes, because I'm not seen as coming to Japan to take advantage or opportunity of the so-called football boom. I came here, I paid my dues. I've done over 2,000 events for 500,000 kids all over the country. I've been to all 47 states like dozens of times. So that was, that's been kind of my baptism, so to speak, is really, getting into the trenches, going to the places that most people don't want to go to try to teach and coach kids. So that's kind of how I think my image or my reputation has been carved out here in Japan.
I think we probably first came to know about the J League over here in England when I think Arsene Wenger made the cross to take on Arsenal in the late 90s. I think that's when we first realised that it's a serious. Japan's really moved on, and what they've got there is a serious thing. And then you see how the team's performed in some of the big tournaments, and you can see there's been a lot of investment and a lot of work towards getting Japan and the nation playing some really good football. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And I know you've been part of that process, which is fantastic. So obviously you played at a very good level and you moved into coaching. How was the transition from kind of playing to coaching? Was that always a plan for you, or did that happen just by chance as well?
Yeah, I fell in love with coaching when I was a young boy in upstate New York. I was very lucky. I was living in upstate New York next to a junior college, we call community college, Ulster County Community College, where we had a Hungarian coach. And that team was a perennial national powerhouse in school, in junior college football or soccer. And it was mostly recruiting immigrants from New York City, Croatians, Greeks, or back in the day, Yugo player, we call them Yugos, Yugoslavian players, Greeks, Italians. So I really fell in love with the game as a kid. But in the summer times, I would go and I would volunteer and work at these kind of soccer camps in America. And I fell in love with that fraternity. I just loved being around the coaches. Of course, I liked the coaching and the playing, but I loved that camaraderie. And it was really very much influenced by a lot of English coaches, a lot of British coaches in the United States back then and even today. And so that kind of shaped my kind of perspective and my kind of love for the game. And I always stick to that. I've always wanted to be involved in coaching young kids and being part of that fraternity. And then it was just a natural progression for me after I decided to stop playing and pursue a coaching career. And I think it really shaped, who I am as well as a person, and about always wanting to learn from as many people as possible. And I still do that now. I mean, I consider myself a lifelong learner, and, I'm often being brought in to learn from, but I'm secretly learning from everybody else as well.
Best way of doing it, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And what type of player were you, Tom? I'm not in this position. Where did you play? But what were you like as? I guess that's maybe a better question. What were you like as a trainer, as a player? Were you a coach's dream, or were you one of those that didn't want to do the odds?
Very. I remember when I went to Ulster County Community College to play, and this was back in 1979. But in 1977 and 78, the college won back-to-back national championships. And the number one draft pick to the North American Soccer League was a Yugoslavian by the name of Diego Pesha, unbelievable player. So there was a lot of pressure to go in there. The problem was at school was they rarely had local kids who could come in and make the team, let alone play and get a starting position. But I did that. That was a massive goal to even this day that I played on that team.
Yeah.
I was, I was in high school. I was a midfield kind of striking, forward going, attacking midfielder. My last year in high school, I was named player of the year in my part of New York. But then I got knocked down to reality when I went to the college, having scored all these goals. And my Hungarian coach said, "No, you're a right back." So I became a defender, a right back. And so, I was good. I was a good, solid college player. And then I went to the University of South Florida, which is a pretty good program as well. Maybe some of your listeners might know, probably the most famous player to play there was a fellow by the name of Roy Wegerle. Roy played at Chelsea, Blackburn Rovers. He's a great player.
Yeah.
And so I won a starting position there as well. So I was pretty good. I came over here in Japan. It's not like I was a household name as a player. I was just, it was very unique. I was the first ever first ever foreigner to ever step foot on Hitachi's training ground.
Wow.
Ever. And
that's
and
impressive.
and get this, and their marquee player that they signed when the J League started, you ready for this?
Yeah, go
was
on.
Careca from Brazil.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I was a mediocre player, very coachable. I remember the Hungarian coach Visvari, preseason, they had an interview with him and he was going through all the new recruits. And I remember he said this about me, Tom Byer, he's very coachable. So
brilliant. There you go. Can't ask more than that. So what about you then, Tom, as a coach? I mean, again, how would you kind of describe, your coaching philosophy and what's important to you when you're coaching the players you have an opportunity to influence and work with?
Well, because I decided to really focus on technical skills, and that in itself is a story that's rooted in England, because my one of my best friends, who unfortunately passed away recently, I'm sure you will know him, is the former England striker Paul Mariner. Yeah. Paul was like a big brother to me. Paul got me interested in the work of the Dutchman Will Curver when I was very, very young, after I got done playing in like the early 90s. So my whole perspective and kind of focus has been on technical skill development, and the whole idea and concept of, technical skills are the foundation upon which you build all the rest of the other parts of the game in. So because I got exposed to the technical component, and working with very, very young players, that really became my passion, was to ensure that kids were learning the proper technical skills to be able to be taught a formation or a system or a particular tactic. And at the younger ages, the reality is that the kids that are the best technically, usually technique and speed wins at the younger ages. There's no doubt about that, right? So up until the age of 12, that's really my major experience and observation has been at that age group. And I loved that. And I never really ventured into anything above that as well. So again, if I was coaching older kids, I would have, transitioned into maybe being, very passionate about a particular system or a formation or a tactic. But I was just always in it for development, which is good, I guess, because, the big question and the big controversy in coaching is, especially with young players, is, are you more of a developer, or is it more, the process of winning, right? And I've always tried to focus on developing. I do have experience coaching. I coached the under 12 Japan national select team for more than 10 years. We would pick players and then take them abroad to play in tournaments overseas. So that kind of fulfilled my interest in wanting to coach. I didn't do it all year round, but I would do it from the spring to the summertime. And again, I focus mainly on developing individual players much more than trying to win titles and win trophies. So that really has impacted my whole kind of philosophy and outlook as much more of a developer than a performance based. Those are the two. You're either into development or performance. And mine has always been the development side.
Tom, we spoke briefly before we hit the record button that you've been a big influence on some of the stuff that I do in my coaching. The best I can do it, but you certainly influenced my approach to coaching. And I heard you say something a few years back. I think it was on a podcast. I can't remember exactly where it was, but along a lot of things you said, but it really stuck with me back then in the start of my coaching journey. It was a generalization, to be fair, but that it was a fair one. You were talking about, I think it was European, but certainly I think maybe the British culture with regards to young parents with their children, and how when we go out as a mum or a dad with our 1 or 2 year old kid, and they're just walking for the first time with the ball at their feet, and we kind of chase them around the park and they're kicking and running after it. Or if you look maybe at Brazilian culture or Latino culture, something like that, where the children are pretty much on the ball and keeping the ball and trying to protect it from their parent, if you like.
Yes.
It feels like that's part of what you are about: stay on the ball and love the ball and manipulate the ball, learn those skills. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is. The reality is I've studied players and teams and cultures and countries, national teams, the best of the best. And I found that at the entry level, particularly, and for your audience, the entry level is is pre-team, before you join a team, which is globally usually around the age of 6, first grade. And I found that the countries that develop the best players in the world, they win the battle at the entry level. And when I say battle, I mean they develop an army of little boys and girls that before they cross over that line into organized play, they're very technically competent and confident with the ball at their feet. So I started observing and going around literally physically in parks in Japan. I've been around the world, America, Australia, in England as well. And when you find little kids in the park with their parents and they have a ball, they're usually kicking it back and forth. So the entry level of the sport is kicking or shooting, because that's what everybody believes. So I basically kind of figured out that, kicking isn't the best technique to be teaching and programming a child. And it wasn't until I really started working with my own children that I figured out that, kicking is not the first technique that you teach. And when you teach a little child, and in the Latin American countries, because culture plays such a big role, England historically, being maybe a cold kind of, a wet climate during the year, back in the olden days, I'm talking, right? It was a little bit more of that kick and rush, right? Just boot it up to the target man, he knocks it down and try to win the second ball or the third ball, right? But in South America, where it's hot, they don't play at that pace. And, the fans, you have to you have to play to the fans, right? The fans want to see, before someone passes the ball, can they beat somebody? Right?
Yeah.
So that's a cultural thing. That's a cultural thing. So, when you give a little Latino child a ball, and I'm talking about a small kid, maybe 4, 5, 6 years of age, even a little older, you give them a ball and you challenge them for it, they'll do one of two things. They'll either try to dribble and get around you, or they'll pull the ball back and they'll protect the ball. Well, if you give that ball perhaps to a little English boy or an American boy, Australian boy, or even Chinese, in many of the cultures, you give them a ball and you challenge them, step up, lunge at them, they'll do one of three things. They'll either kick it and freeze, they'll kick it and try to beat you to it, or they'll bend over and they'll pick it up. Yeah. And so when I started seeing with my own kids, the whole genesis of this, Soccer Starts at Home is based on real time reality work with my own kids, because I'd always been working with other people's kids. So it wasn't until I really got a glimpse into the entry level that I've started to have a complete rethink on development and how important that entry level really is.
Well, you've mentioned it then. This is kind of the key part of the episode today. It's looking at this kind of the concepts of soccer starts at home. And I know that's something that's been passionate. You've been behind that for many years now. We kind of get the genesis, I think, by what you said there, but a little about where that came from your own children, by the sounds of it, but how that's kind of grown and what you mean by soccer starts at home, because there's a danger with this. And I think if we just get a little information, I can just see lots of, and I'd be one of these parents probably 6 or 7 years ago, where actually I've got my 2-year-old in the garden doing drills up and down, and I think that's probably not what you're trying to get to here. So what is soccer starts at home, and kind of where did it come from and what does it look like?
This is the genesis of it. 2006. I'm in Japan after doing an event for several hundred kids. I usually do these technical skills events, right? One player, one ball, show them lots of different ball mastery, moves, all kinds of stuff. And I was literally holding the ball in my hands. I was doing an event for Adidas, and I've worked with them for many years as their football ambassador. And they were giving me these tiny little balls, miniature balls, we call them replica balls. And I was signing them as autographs, and I was giving them to kids. And the proverbial apple, but ball this time fell right in my lap. While I was doing it, I thought to myself, the light bulb went off, because my first son that was born, Kaito, he was 1 year old, he started walking around the house. And I thought this little ball would be perfect for him, because these balls aren't meant to be kicked or played with. They're just meant to sit on a shelf with something. So I literally, this is a true story, Scott, I cocked my head to one of the Adidas guys there. I said, hey, in Japanese, send me one of these balls to my house while I'm doing it. Boom. And that was it. And then a huge case of balls arrived at my house, like 20 balls. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with these balls? So I put 1 or 2 in my house, and then I were just always sitting there saying, well, that's what. And I wound up like literally scattering these balls in every room of my house. And because I'm a technical coach, I knew the importance of ball mastery and holding the ball. So I discouraged kicking. I just discouraged it. And I did that by modeling it, showing and just pulling the ball back, just with the sole of the foot, gliding, bouncing off of the sofa, bouncing off of the wall. And I didn't used to like kind of, force it. It was done in a very kind of organic, natural way. And also the iPhones had just come out. So I started documenting from like day one of my kids. I've got many, many more videos of my second son than I do of the first one, because first of all, I didn't do it with the idea of traveling around the world and being invited to some of the biggest club teams in the world to present this whole philosophy. I just did it as a father, right? So then I started getting these videos, and then just one thing led to the other. And just, it was just unbelievable how things started to fall into place. Then I started to do a lot of analyzing and connecting dots. And I connect dots by looking backwards instead of looking forward. Everything was based on what I'd done 20, 25 years as a technical coach, working in media, working with brands, being on TV, creating content, doing events. I started to also question the whole developmental model, okay? In the traditional sense that, development only takes place between a coach and a kid. And I started studying these countries. And the one question I had was, why out of 211 member association countries in FIFA, only 8 have ever won a World Cup tournament? And it's the same serial repeaters every time. So I started studying those countries to ask questions. Do they have more coaches? Do they have better trained coaches? Do they have a better curriculum? Do they have better coaches education? Do they have better elite player pathways? Do they have better facilities? And I came up with like none of the above. But what the constant was, is that I saw that these countries had cultures in place that were very conducive to developing players. And what do I mean by that? Their culture of development started several years before in the traditional sense. So kids are exposed to a ball at the age of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those critical years of 4 years getting a jump, if you've got 2 little boys or girls that cross over the line into organized play at the age of 6, and the one kid has been playing with a ball for 4 years, and this kid has never touched the ball, never say never, but this kid is not going to catch this kid. They just don't. And so, and the football world, soccer world hasn't really given a lot of thought to it because they hadn't crossed over the line into organized play. So they're not in the so-called system. They're not on the radar screen. So when people would see the super talented little 6, 7-year-old, they believe that lightning struck in a bottle. Oh, that kid's a natural. Oh my God, that's the next Messi. So then countries are spending, years like searching for like, where's that Ronaldo in China? Where's that little Messi in America? He must be somewhere. So talent identification is grossly misinterpreted. I'm much more believer of talent development. And I think that when I look at kids now, I look at them with a different set of lenses or glasses. And when I look at some kids and I see like at the age of 7 or 8, some kids are really, really good and some kids aren't, I don't look at them and say, hey, that kid's really bad. I just understand that child didn't have the opportunity to develop like my kids did. Yeah. And so you look at it through a different set of lenses. And the reality is that football or soccer has not caught up to what science already knows. And that is that skill acquisition happens from a much earlier age than supposed. So again, connecting the dots, I look back and I started reading all these so-called national curriculums. And what they do is they lump kids into phases. 6 to 9 is the first phase. They call it the discovery phase. And they build the characteristics of a child, 6 to 9. Clumsy, lacks motor skills, short attention span, play fun games related to football, and somehow the kid's going to play like Messi. Now, that's a very kind of European-centric kind of approach, because all of the coaches' education for half a century has come from Europe. And it came from Europe not assuming or having the belief that there's a technical deficit. So almost all coaches' education is based more on systems, tactics, formation, the psychological component, the physical component, and not thinking that it's to do with the technical deficit. And I think that's where it goes wrong. And things just haven't changed. So you get coaches who are trying to apply these different methodologies to kids that, can't transfer the ball from the right foot to the left or from the left foot to the right. So that's where, it was a big wake up call for me.
So I guess one of the challenges over here has been there's definitely been a move towards, I'm going to say, kind of opposed game-based practices away from maybe more traditional drill-based technical grooving kind of approach. I'm not kind of say what's right and what's wrong. I'm sure there's room for both. I guess one of the challenges as a grassroots coach is when you want to build technique into your players is how you do that in a fun way, an effective and fun way, I guess. Is that a challenge that you've seen in your experience? And is that something that has to be overcome to make this work effectively?
Yeah, well, yes. And the thing is that's why the entry level is so crucial, because a child at 6 or 7 who's already mastered what are the basic skills? Stop, start, turn, change direction, protect the ball. Okay. And if that child is already prepared and they're off to what I call, and I'm stealing my good friend Todd Beam's characteristic of our program, is that getting parents off, parents getting their child off to a flying head start. That's what we do. And so that child is going to be much, much, much more set up to have fun, and fun equals wanting to practice more equals, becoming better. And it's all connected. So you can improve kids. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's no doubt about it, even at any age group, but I'm not so sure that you will get the result that you're looking for from trying to teach technical skills to a kid who's just starting out from 8, 9, 10 years of age. Now, there's so many different directions you could go. If we're talking about elite player development and building up the elite player pool and this and that, but, hey, who's to say that, if a kid that wants to start playing at the age of 10, 11, or 12, of course, that kid should obviously have the right, and he should get as much good coaching as possible. And I have seen kids that do improve dramatically who have a different baseline. But if we're talking about creating a strategy for like a country or an organization or a club team that wants to build the player pool, because the only way to really make the best players better in any club is by making the least developed players better. They're the ones that push the best players to become better. So it's really kind of what your perspective is. What's your goal? What level are you working at? But, again, I would kind of die on the hill of, for me, if I'm looking, and I've been very lucky, I've worked at the professional level. I've worked with, a national team, kind of elite players as well in countries. I've worked with, and mentored coaches that have gone on to win World Cup tournaments on the women's side, or captain national teams to World Cup championships. So I've gotten a very good glimpse of what it is that they're doing and what kind of training they do and what kind of, education they've had and how that applies to what they're doing. So I've had a lot that I've observed, right? And so that entry level to me is just, if you miss that, it's very hard to close that gap. And that's what happens, is that many countries believe that the battle's at the elite level, but they've lost at the entry level. And so, and they try to make that up.
You mentioned before about conve coaching, and I believe that's been a bit of an influence in what you've done, because I guess the premise behind that is all about technical grooving and being a master of the ball. Has that been influencing what you've done and how you've adapted to your own coaching philosophy and the things you believe in?
Yeah, so I introduced that philosophy, the conve methodology, to Japan back in 1993, the same year that the J League was born. And so again, we were able to kind of jump on the bandwagon or the coattails of soccer or football being very popular here with the J League as well. But yeah, it's definitely shaped my way. I led and ran the program here out in Asia for about 15 years. So again, that's why, I mean, I've seen a lot of coaches' education, coaching of kids, working with parents, and I've seen all that. And it has a huge presence here. I spun out of it more than 10 years ago, but I led it for 15 years. But the one thing that I started to sit back and realize is that we have schools here. These schools are commercial schools. The kids pay to play in it, but they basically come and just get the technical training. They'll come once a week, usually, any day that they'll come. But I started to see that literally most of the best kids in our programs we inherit, like any kind of organization. So you can very rarely say that there's any particular program that has their kind of, footprint on developing that kid. Like, for example, boy that plays at Liverpool, Takumi Minamino, Japanese boy there. Came to our school for 6 years, first grade to sixth grade. And everybody knew that he was a good kid. There's another kid, Ditsu Doan. These are two big national team players. And also the captain of Stuttgart, Endo Watada. These are all kids from our schools. And these kids were really good. And I started to read and study these players. And I found out, which I didn't know, Minamino, who plays at Liverpool, his dad was working with him in around his home between the ages of 1 and 3 is when he started, around 2 years of age. And there was an interview done about him, and I read that. So usually if you know where to look, you can find what is very common, and that is that the best of the best, they all benefited from an early start in around the home and the relationship to the fathers, sometimes the mothers.
And Tom, I guess my slight worry about this is it could be mistaken in the sense of right now we've got lots of academies over in the UK for like 1 to 3 year olds, and it's already getting younger and younger. There was a story a few weeks ago about a Premier League club taking on a 4-year-old, and I'm not judging it. I guess in some ways, if it's the right for the child and the parents and it's the right environment, then fantastic. It's about horses for courses, right? And I don't know, a bit unfair question on you. What would be some of your tips and guidance, either for parents or for coaches, maybe when they're working with young players, particularly the youngest of the young? You're talking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old kids. What were some of the do's and don'ts, if you're happy to share? And that's probably a bit of an unfair question, but just so we don't get this wrong, if we're going to adopt some of these things.
No, it's not unfair at all. This is a great opportunity for me to explain clearly. I don't advocate for any of these kind of programs of collectively practicing with 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds at all. So our program is completely based on that connection and relationship between child and parent in a very free, fun environment where kids can fail in a very safe place, which is in around the home. So yeah, let's be clear. I'm not saying that anybody should be, I'm completely against that. Now, there's groups that do that, and they kind of masquerade as football development, but they're not. You can't take a little 2, 3, 4-year-olds collectively, 10, 15, 20 of them, and expect to teach anything. But, and I've had a change of thought about it, these programs do at least expose kids to outdoors, running around, getting them physically active. There's lots of ways that you could look at it. But our program is not, and so even those schools that I'm talking about, whether it's the Kerber schools or even my own personal school I used to run, we don't start until the age of 6, until they cross over that line into organized play. And you're only talking about once a week that they come. So that was my whole point, is that a player like Minamino, who plays at Liverpool, how can we possibly say that we completely developed that player when he used to come to our school once a week, and half of it was a warm-up, a fun drill, and then half of it dividing up into 4 teams and playing little mini games. That was it. So what I'm saying is that a lot of the work is done before the child ever crosses over into the line into order to play. Now, one other thing that we haven't talked about is that our program is it's much, much, much more than a football or soccer program. It's got to do with child development and learning and the interaction between children. I'm involved in several research projects with big universities. Some of these professors are from Stanford University, Harvard, University of Houston, University of Michigan, University of North Carolina. We have a full-time soccer starts at home research laboratory inside the University of Houston. That's literally outside the door of them. That's all they do is study it, because what Soccer Starts at Home program does is it basically gets a child and parents interacting and playing together from a very, very early age. But here's the kicker. Those universities, they're not studying the program because of the soccer component. They're studying the program for the cognitive, emotional, social, and physical skills that are being developed. So when you have a child playing around your home, that's considered a very safe, protective environment. This doesn't fall in the context of a team. It falls in the context of a family. So when a little child, and maybe you've seen up on my social media, I show videos of kids like ball mastery, my own kids at 2, 3, 4 years of age inside the home playing around. Those don't exist in the absence of a parent. A little 3, 4-year-old, you are never going to find a little 3, 4-year-old in a room by themselves doing ball mastery. Never happened. But that's the whole genesis of our program. It's basically empowering parents to play with their kids in a meaningful way. It's really kind of deep learning disguised as playtime in a fun environment. But here's the gift to the parents. The home serves as a very safe, protective environment away from ridicule. But here's the gift. It's the parents' understanding of their child's need for parental attention, parental approval, and parental praise. And what that does is it creates a chemical, electrical process in the child, which is emotions. And when you can create an emotionally charged environment where a child is thinking, feeling, and moving, and they're starving for that attention from mom and dad, that social element of please join in and have fun with me, that's where deep learning and long-term memory takes place. So that's the magic of what we're doing. And that has tremendous benefits. And one last thing before I come up for air while I'm on a roll here. The other thing, when you think of it and you see these videos of kids doing ball mastery, and I'm talking about these kids are 2, 3, 4 years old, that I've got unbelievable videos of my own kids. What you're looking at isn't so much football or soccer development. Ball mastery is teaching a young child from a very young age one of the most important life skills in life. You know what that is? How to pay attention. So when a child learns focused attention at the age of 2 or 3 or 4 years old, that's when and only when the learning switch gets turned on. And that spills over into everything else: science, mathematics, knitting, playing chess, anything. When you can teach a child how to pay attention, because I don't care if you bring the best coach in the world to coach your little 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, if that child isn't paying attention, learning does not take place. And it's the same thing in a classroom. You can bring, the teacher of the year 10 years in a row to your child, and if he or she is not paying attention, learning does not take place. So the reality is that this ball mastery and soccer starting at home is developing much, much, much more than becoming a good soccer player. And we know that because our research data is showing that. We can actually correlate and see kids that have been in our program from these very young ages and what their performance is in the classroom. So this is really groundbreaking stuff. And that's the reason that it's garnered such interest from some of these top universities in the US.
I guess what I hadn't realized before speaking to you today is the impact you're having on these by influencing this parental kind of setup at home to give these young children the best opportunity to develop and learn cognitive skills and all these other bits coming with it all is the life skill side. So building things like resilience, a desire to learn, like you say, responsibility, wanting to be better, that kind of thing. But the benefit of that is it goes into education, right? Whether that's in formal school education, but also as coaches out there, if we get a parent that's raised a player those 2 or 3 or 4 years before they come to us as a coach, wow, these are the kids we want to have, right? And these are the ones, he's a dream or she's a dream to coach. And it's almost like it's by luck that's happened. But actually, it's the bit that's going on at home, I guess, and that's what you've influenced.
Absolutely. When kids show up to these training sessions, they think again like lightning struck in a bottle. But the reality is that ball mastery from a very young age and that interaction between child and parent. First of all, it's teaching parents what development looks like. Most parents have no idea. They don't know, is my child developing? And a lot of coaches might not be able to know as well. But here's the kicker. We find now through research, this is just data that we're seeing, an observation, is that through ball mastery, it's teaching children focused attention. It's teaching them how to be better thinkers, how to concentrate better memory, better focus, less disciplinary problems inside the classroom. It's got massive implications for everything. I was on a call a couple of months ago with a group from FIFA. They asked me to present to them. And I say this to all the big organizations: football alone cannot stand on its own 2 feet. And what I mean is that I go around the world pre-COVID and I get in a room with several hundred moms and dads. I can't sit up there on a stage and show videos of my kids playing and just based on football alone, convince those families, put the kids in the football program because football's great. It's number one in the world. But I can convince them if they think it's going to make their kids smarter. It's going to make them better focus, better attention span, better concentration, everything. Here's another couple of things. We have a massive problem with child obesity. Well, child obesity, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that kids, by the time they reach adolescence, if they're obese, the likelihood of a lifetime of obesity goes up like massively. Here's the good news. If a child can avoid obesity by the age of 6, they have an 80% chance more likelihood to never incur adult obesity. That's massive. So if you understand that, connect the dots. What age are you talking about getting a kid active? 3, 4, 5, 6, boom. If you can avoid that obesity, 80% chance. Another thing that's very interesting is that fathers in particular have a very difficult time bonding with a small child for obvious reasons, right? Awkward, don't really know how to keep their attention, how to play with them. They identify the most crucial golden age for a father to bond with a child is between the ages of 3 and 5. Okay, again, so that's a crucial golden age for many, many different things. I mean, we kind of fell upon that because I was lucky when I was writing the book, Football Starts at Home, together with actually a British writer, a buddy of mine, Fred Varco. And we were doing lots of research and things. But after we got done writing it, I caught the attention of a Dr. John Rady from Harvard Medical School. He's one of the foremost neuropsychiatrists in the world. He's written a dozen books on neuroscience. And he's been the pioneer to show that physical exercise supercharges the mind and the brain, supercharges learning, okay? When you get up and move around, it wakes and shakes the body up, but it also wakes the brain up. So there's tremendous benefits for getting kids early. But he was the one when he started looking at, so we hadn't published the book yet, and he had heard about the book, and he asked to read the manuscript, sent it to him. He wound up writing the foreword, the afterword. After that, I've collaborated with him. I've met him in Boston by Harvard. I've met him in Palo Alto by Stanford. He's come to Japan. So there's been this wonderful collaboration. And when I started putting the dots together and understanding more of the neuroscience of what was happening, here's another really cool thing. The part of the brain that's responsible for ball mastery is called the cerebellum. Now, the neuroscience world believed that the cerebellum was only mostly responsible for motor skills, balance, rhythm, timing. But the new neuroscience shows that the cerebellum is responsible for much more. What? Thinking, remembering, which is memory, controlling emotions, okay, decision-making, single-digit mathematics, and reading. Those are massive. So again, the reason that Dr. Rady took an interest in our program, again, not because of the football or the soccer side, but because he believes that the ball mastery and that bonding and interaction with the child and the parent and the cerebellum, which is the seat of the unconscious mind, brain, that's where all of your memory is stored. Whether it's a physical task or it's a mental task, it's all in the cerebellum. So the feet, being the furthest distance from the brain, we very rarely have any opportunities to build neural pathways. But ball mastery does it. So as it turns out, it's a very good training for the cerebellum. And they all, and what's happening is that it spills over into other disciplines, such as math, science, and things like that. So it's very fascinating. And I learned a lot from being around these smart guys. One of my favorite lines in the world is, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? And so I kind of, when I was going around doing my presentations with grassroots volunteer coaches and parents, kind of feeling like, hey, man, I'm the smart guy in the room. Well, it wasn't until I started getting put into the room with these brilliant educators with PhDs, have written like tons of books. And I was being brought in to learn from, but again, I was secretly learning from them. And I learned so much from them, connecting those dots. And that's what's really kind of shaped. And that's why I'm so passionate about this entry level and ensuring that parents understand it.
Done such a wonderful job there in highlighting the thing that actually we're passionate about football, and I'm passionate about foundation football, but it's more than that. It's not about the ball on the grass or where we put our cones or the sessions that we run or ball striking. I mean, this is all part of it, right? But actually it's this life skill stuff. And you summed it up so well, because what we see time and time again is, if we take a group of 30 kids that are under 6s, which we get at our club, and we put them into three teams, A, B, and C. We call them red, white, and blue, but it's A, B, and C. What we're really doing is basically looking at how much football these kids have played, or at least the environments in which they've been brought up in those previous 4, 5, 6 years. It's not about their footballing ability. It's just how much time they've had to develop some of these skills. And a lot of these things has nothing to do with football. It is about what's your attitude to learning, what's your resilience. And it's not because the parents are good or bad parents. It's just the fact that they've had different experiences, and they if it's your first kid, we get a few things wrong. Then by kid 3, we get it really good, So it's that kind of stuff. And I think if coaches understood more about this world and the world that you talk about and this learning, I think would be much better for it, because we'd see the children in different ways and we'd support in different ways as well. And I just feel like sometimes it's the educational background that when coaches have that, there's a massive help. If you come from education, you see it a bit different and you can fill some of these gaps. If you have no education background in the sense of being a practitioner of education, I'm not going through school, and then you take on a team to coach, especially foundation phase, I think you can miss this stuff. And what you've done there, I think, is really put it together. It wasn't necessarily intentional, I guess, from you, but is that what you've discovered on your journey as well? Almost a missing piece of the puzzle?
100%. I mean, and also I've been very fortunate because I've been able to get in front of the top people in our game. I mean, I've been invited to Manchester United by Ryan Giggs. I've been invited to present to Pochettino at Spurs. I've been invited to, present to, guys at Dortmund with Karl-Heinz Riedel leading the group. So, and I don't say that to pat myself on the back, but it's been important. I was invited into the boardroom of Ajax, or been invited physically to Zagreb, to Dynamo Zagreb, right? And also all these places. So I've been able to put this premise and this philosophy in front of the best and the brightest. And it's all come together. And I found what was really amazing to me is that the people that I thought should know better and know more than I did, they tended to not understand it, but in a good way, they embraced it. And it's so funny because the clubs and the countries that I thought would be the least likely to embrace me are the ones that have. They're the ones that have, because they get it. And even the German, I've been presented to guys at the DFB, head of coaches education, or the Bundesliga, or just any of these, right? And I think that what happens is that, when you can really kind of look at the whole full picture. And I think because of the way that my career turned out, that I've got a very good skill set of the ecosystem of football, that I connected dots and I could see where were gaps in information that people didn't quite understand. And that's been, just very, 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 very kind of holistically, that's what a lot of the stuff was, trial by error. Yeah. But you quickly learn, you keep an open mind. And I think, again, mixing in and collaborating with these educators, because teachers are just wonderful to be around. I mean, when you look at even over football, for some of the best coaches in the world have been, off in school. Gerard Houllier, who I knew quite well. He came to Japan a lot. I worked with the French Federation when they'd come over to Japan. He was a school teacher. He taught English as a Frenchman in England when he was a young guy. So that whole way of processing it is definitely something to it.
Well, you're obviously at the sharp end here, and you're surrounded by some wonderful people doing some great research. I'll be interested to know, how do you see things evolving in the next 5 or 10 years or so? Have we got it right now? And is that how things are going to stay, or do you think there'd be different changes looking ahead?
Yeah, I mean, the good stuff, the good news for me is that I'm being invited in and accepted. I think eventually this whole idea of football or soccer starting at home is going to become very self-evident. It takes time. Change doesn't happen overnight. You have to kind of pick your battles sometimes as well. It's very hard to lead like a national program because the politics are exhausting at federations and things like that. But you start out with communities. I think that we're headed in a good position, especially now today because of, the reach that we have on social media, the internet. I mean, Zoom calls and just everything. I mean, it's just easier to get the word out and to collaborate with different groups and organizations. I'm living in the part of the world, which is the third world area for football, right, in Asia. But the good stuff is that it's easier to work in a country that has no football culture than it is to work in a country that has the wrong football culture. So I see, and especially out here in Asia, where They really value teaching and learning. There's kind of an old proverb, I can't say exactly what it is, but that whole idea of, the empty mind has limited potential because they're starting with nothing, right? They already have these all preconceived. Some of the guys that we work with when we used to train our coaches were kids that just graduated high school or college that have no real bag football before they even get any of their football licenses. Yeah. And we put them into our training, and they specialize in technical development. And some of those kids and young coaches turn out to be better technical coaches than maybe the guy who's got the A license, because they specialize in something, right? And that's another kind of fallacy, that believing that the guy with a pro license from UEFA knows everything from A to Z in football development. They don't. And that's no disrespect, because I have a lot of those guys are my friends too. So, it's great just discussing it and talking about it. But there's the good news is I think people are coming around, and I'm very optimistic.
I'd love to see, Tom, an A license qualification for foundation phase football. I think there's so much in foundation phase football alone to learn about, and to really master that as an age group and an age range, because stuff you learn on the higher level qualifications, if you like, tends to lean itself towards like 9-11 aside and adult football, and actually doesn't necessarily help you with the younger ones. It would be great to have something like that.
And I think what the biggest kind of misconception is that, and I hate to say this, but I think that coaching at the young ages is a little bit overrated. It's misunderstood. Of course, there's great coaches, but my point is this. If you develop an army of kids that are skilled at ball mastery before they cross over the line into organized play at 6 years of age, my experience has been is that kid, like my two boys, cross over the line into organized play. They had coaches that were just volunteer parents, okay? But here's the elevator pitch. The kids that cross over that line that are already technically strong, even paired with the inexperienced volunteer parent coach, those kids develop, man. They develop until the age of 12 or 13. At first, when my son started playing organized football, I kind of was pulling my hair out at first. That was when I was on TV. I've been on TV daily for like 14 years. I'm the technical coach here, blah, 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 blah. But my son is playing for a team whose coach is not really a formal coach. And so at first I was pulling my hair out saying, well, my good, but here it is, man. It's a hit or a miss, depending upon where you live. Is going to depend upon the quality of the coach that you have. It wasn't until a couple of years later that I figured out, wow, my son is in one of the best environments. You know why? Because he's so good technically. Okay. And the coach doesn't overcoach him. Yeah. So that's where the just let him play, it actually works. But the just let him play doesn't work with a kid's baseline that has no technical. This whole idea that just throw him in there, that kid's going to learn on the street. That's so overrated. That's so ridiculous. Okay. Now, so now I understand that. I understand that the coach is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating that we don't need coaches. I have affection for coaches because I am one. But the reality is, when it comes to skill acquisition, Roy Keane said it best, man. Skill was and never will be the result of coaching. It's a love affair between child and ball. Provocative statement, but if you figure that out, that's exactly what it is. And when I started researching the great players, dribblers, especially like a player like Neymar, and I came along a interview with his dad, and his dad said, hey, people don't understand in Brazil, we play on. He said, they don't understand that kids in Brazil, they don't fall in love with football. They fall in love with the ball. They fall in love with the ball first. And then if you get that, it's such a simple premise, but it's just misunderstood because people like to complicate things and say, well, it can't be that easy, can it? I'm afraid so. It can be.
I can 100% be a living example of that. I mean, my coaching philosophy, and I think I'm quite a good coach, but I'm not. I'm a good facilitator. I just take 10, 12 great young kids with a great attitude and create an environment in which encourages positive attitude and let them play against each other. Now, I'll step in and help when I need to on an individual basis and try and give some advice and guidance when I think I can add some value, but they learn best from each other. And if you've got 10 or 12 kids that have got good resilience, a desire to learn, a desire to compete, and you put 2 goals and the ball in there and they love the ball, then they're going going to get better. And actually, I'm probably going to get more in the way than help the more I say. There's times when I can chip in and add stuff, but create the right games, create the right environment, have the right standards and the right core values, respect, effort, fun. It's amazing what can be done. You don't have to coach. You just got to let them be there and facilitate.
And that's it. And most don't get it, you could take a volunteer mom or dad who maybe played in college a little bit, or is a good organizer. They've got their own kids. They understand, child, adult relationships. They show up on time. They put on a good session, blah, blah, blah. Now, if that coach has like really good players, really top players, that coach is going to look like a genius. Or you could bring the guy who's got the A license that gets, who lives in an area where he's got, 16 kids that have never played before, and they get beat, 6-0, and everybody's going to think that coach is terrible, right? And so it's managing the expectations. It's understanding what development looks like, understanding that there's a limit to what influence you can have on as a coach, considering what the level of the kids are that you're inheriting as well. It's got lots of things. Pep Guardiola said it best. He said it over and over again. If he was at a lesser club, he'd probably win no silverware. He's actually said that himself, that if you were to put him at a very lower level club where he doesn't have, the hundreds of millions to buy the best players. Now, that's not to say, he's one of my favorite coaches in the world. Jurgen Klopp's another one. But these guys have huge budgets. Even the academies, right? The academies are finishing schools. They take the best possible players that they think have potential in the world, bring them up, and they're finishing schools. They polish them up and they develop them into professional players. But the big question is, and then these other countries, the developing countries, they think, oh, okay, well, then we better hire one of the former coaches or academy directors of Liverpool or Ajax and bring him to China to coach our team in Beijing, because somehow he's going to get the same result, which they never do.
Work, yeah.
Doesn't work,
Does it work? Oh, Tom, this has been excellent. My final two questions. I pushed my luck with your time. I said an hour. We've already got to that point, so I could talk for hours with you. But look, two quick questions, if that's okay, before we finish off. Just really, first of all, your plans moving forward. What's the hopes and dreams for you? You've done good. The kid from the Bronx and all that. So what's next?
Well, the one thing that the whole COVID-19 crisis has taught us is that I don't have to move around as much as we thought so.
Yeah.
So, people now are much more accustomed to getting things delivered to them on their laptop, using ways to be creative in delivering that content. So pre-COVID-19, I was spending a ridiculous amount of time traveling, and I love to travel. My kids are getting a little bit older now, and they're a little bit more serious about football. So I enjoy trying to support them and watch them. I probably going forward in the next few years won't do nearly the amount of traveling that I've done in the past. But having said that, we are relying much more on connecting. It's all about the connectivity. And so we've got some really exciting tools that we're building. One of the big complaints that I get is because I work at the high end, where I work with professional clubs, or I consult with countries, ministries, I work with brands, media groups, is that the kind of, the core, the pyramid that makes up like the very tiny percentage of the top, but the 90% or 99% that will never become professionals, we are developing some online tools that we think are going to be very helpful for clubs that can basically give this away free to their parents. And so we need to identify, which we have, how do we connect more with early learning centers, with preschools, with kindergartens, with first and second grade kids? How can we hitch our wagons to that? And we've pretty much figured that out, because we have a very robust program in Houston that does exactly that. So now we've been in it's really R&D, research and development. That's exactly what's happening in Houston with the professional club and the university there. So now after 3 years of this research, we're now in a very good position to be able to scale that out using online stuff. So that's really what I'm focusing on now. I think that was your first question, right?
Yeah. So that sounds like a really exciting plan, and something that's going to be massively important to changing maybe the way that football is. So that's superb. My second question really was just along the lines of, if there was, we ask every guest this, if there was one thing you could change about the world of coaching or football, what might that be?
Well, that's a good one. I think to maybe coaches understand better the role that parents can play to help them. because right now parents are looked as upon stereotyped like the ugly parents that are on the sidelines. So I've done a thing, from all these national curriculums that I've ever read and manuals. The first thing I do when I get them, I type in and I search for the word parent or family, and they're non-existent. I mean, maybe someone can find one, but they're to me non-existent. So that to me tells me that they don't understand the coaching and the edge. I think there's coaches need to understand there's a difference between actually coaching and like pure teaching of skill development and basic core skills. What we're focusing on isn't so much coaching. We're focusing on ensuring that kids master and learn those basic tech. It's all about skill development, So I think that needs to be more accepted into the coaching paradigm of that, what the role is that parents teach, and what the role is of the coaches to facilitate at those younger ages, a culture of development that understands the importance of ball mastery. I probably gave you a few too many, but that's kind of the way it shapes up for me.
Perfect answer. Thank you so much, Tom. That's been superb, above and beyond my hopes and expectations. Everything I hear you say and do, I love. We had Sorbine on the podcast a few weeks back, and I know you kind of have a similar approach to how you go about things, which is fantastic. But for me, I can just say, look, I'm so grateful. You are busy and you didn't have to do this today, but you kindly offered. I know listeners will get a lot of listening to the things you've said. What's hit home to me is that missing piece in the jigsaw puzzle really for player development. It's just that key fundamental stage about actually just being a good coachable kid and that life skill side behind it, which parents can foster at a young age, right? And I'm sure the book will help that. If people want to find out more about you, the work, the book and everything that's going on, what's the best way of doing that, Tom?
Sure. Well, social media, as you know, I'm on Twitter, and that's pretty simple. Tomsan 106. Tomsan as in TOMSAN 106. If they were interested in the book, it's a long word. Soccer Starts at Home book, one long word, .com, and they can find out about that. It's funny because you say the jigsaw puzzle, and I only bring this up because I have such deep respect from a friend of mine who is, for me, even though he's younger than me, he's much more, he's kind of my, I look up to him as a technical god, and that's Rene Mollenstein. Rene's a friend of mine, and recently we caught up a couple months ago, and I showed him all the updates, and he put out a wonderful book. If any, not to but he put out a really great book recently about his days at Manchester United and all the technical training he did. And he actually said to me, he said, "You know what? This football starts at home is the missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle." And when he said that, I thought, wow, because this is a guy that's, won Champions League and Premier League tournament, trophies. So, and I love to engage with people. So thank you for this opportunity as well. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm happy to come back at any time for a part 2.
Well, that was my next question. My final question was going to be that. We'll put all the links in the show notes to everything that you've mentioned. So people got your Twitter handle, the book link and everything like that. And look, Tom, if there's any point to get at some point in the future, I'd love to get an update on how things are progressing. I think it is a fundamental part of how youth development is going to go in the next few years. And the project you're doing and all that stuff sounds great. So I'd love an update maybe in 6-12 months time if you're hoping to come on again, if that'd be all right.
Sure, would love to. Anytime, my friend.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Appreciated. Stay safe and well.
Okay, thank you.
This episode is brought to you in association with our friends at Spond. Spond takes all the hassle out of organising any group event and is ideal for coaches and managers when dealing with the administration of their teams. We've been using the Spond app for about 2 seasons now, and it's been superb help in removing the hurdles so we can spend more time doing the things that we love. Spond works across any device and allows you to share files, create polls, schedules, manage events, attendances, make payments, send group and private messages, and it even syncs across with your calendar. For more information on Spond or this episode, please see the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the episode.